Hi, my name is Mike Eskey. I'm Associate Professor of Criminal Justice and the Program Coordinator for Criminal Justice Program at Park University. Additionally, I'm on half-time release as an online instructor evaluator for Park Distance Learning. In this capacity, I perform formal observations on approximately 100 online adjunct faculty members on an annual basis. As the Program Coordinator of the Criminal Justice Program, I oversee the teaching of over 100 adjunct instructors, both online and face-to-face. And as an online instructor evaluator, I work with a team of 5 online evaluators, a coordinator, and the lead instructor. As such, I have a very unique opportunity to view, to review, to evaluate, and observe nearly 300 courses from all disciplines per year. And as the title indicates, subject will be examining the importance of the application of critical thinking in the online classroom. And this was originally spurred by a personal experience of an influx of students in the online classroom that did not appear to be able to define or apply critical thinking in their in-class and assignment submissions. And this lack of definition and application could be attributed to a number of factors related to instruction and the emphasis and the lack thereof of instruction specifically related to critical thinking. There's a concern that critical thinking is not included in all college courses, more specifically for me, in criminal justice courses. And this led to my research, which is in a nearly complete phase of pinpointing the problem and identifying the source or lack of emphasis of critical thinking. And as such, I embarked on a personal research project to determine if there is a consensus on the level of importance of defining teaching and applying critical thinking instruction in college courses. And if this varied by full-time and part-time instructors, as we are about 90% adjunct at Park University, or if it varied by discipline, or by those instructors that had participated or received some specific training or professional development or instruction in critical thinking. I'll address the material directly related to mine and others, concern related to teaching and producing students with critical thinking skills, and the findings related to my own research. I'll invite your responses when I provide my contact information to some of the areas related to the topic, and ask for those questions at the end of this. As an introduction to my presentation, I want to provide you with a brief overview of Park University. It's a small liberal arts college located in Parkville, Missouri, which is a suburb of Kansas City on the banks of the Missouri River. There is approximately 1,800 students attending the main campus, and there are over 40 campus centers located throughout the United States. The majority of Park students are enrolled in online courses, with over 50,000 online enrollments annually, and 9 completely online undergraduate, 5 completely online graduate programs. I'll follow the ordering of the bullets on the slide, providing you with a background, definition, the application of critical thinking in the classroom, instruction, the importance of, and the current research project, and findings, perceptions, and suggestions related to the topic. Research indicates that both academics and students have differing perceptions of what happens in the university classroom, online and face-to-face, particularly in regard to higher order thinking, more specifically, critical thinking. A number of researchers have assessed how instructors define their teaching and how they define and instruct in order to promote critical thinking by their students. You know, Richard Paul, who's a noted scholar on the subject area of critical thinking, reported that in a study conducted for the University System of California, that while an overwhelming majority of responding university faculty members, and that is 89%, claim that critical thinking is a primary objective of their instruction. Only 19% could define critical thinking. 77% had little or no conception of how to reconcile content coverage with the fostering of critical thinking into their classes. Only a very small minority could clearly explain the meaning of basic terms in critical thinking. Philip Abrami and 6 Canadian co-authors published a review of 117 empirical studies assessing the impact of critical thinking instruction on critical thinking skills and dispositions, and they confirmed that some instruction, not surprisingly, has a powerful positive effect, and some instruction has no effect at all. And overall, these results support the view that, on balance, there is some measurable positive effect. And Brahmi and his colleagues addressed the effect of pedagogical interventions intended to improve critical thinking. And in their meta-analysis, they came up with 4 categories of intervention approach, which are used mainly in college courses: a general, in which critical thinking is taught as a separate subject, which is most normally; infusion, where it's taught by means of adopting it, the critical perspective on the content of different subjects; or immersion, where it's like infusion, but in which critical thinking principles are not explicitly articulated. Critical thinking is emphasized, but not specifically emphasized throughout the assignments. And the 4th approach is a mixed or a combination of general and either infusion or immersion. This division of modes of teaching critical thinking led to my own current research, and there's a conscious effort within courses to emphasize the inclusion or exclusion of specific emphasis of critical thinking via lectures and assignments. And how is this dictated? Most institutions want their graduates to be able to ask relevant questions that clarify and focus on a problem or a scenario or an argument, and to be able to evaluate the quality and usefulness of their gathered information, and to recognize and analyze assumptions and alternate divergent and conflicting perspectives, and finally to be able to synthesize and articulate solutions. But where and in what courses and at what level and to what degree and possibly in what discipline is this emphasized? This was a portion of the research completed. The definition of critical thinking has many variations, but there exist definitions that address key concepts and applications to many disciplines. One was introduced by Scriven and Paul, who are recognized experts on the subject, most notably through the critical thinking community. You can read their definition and note the concepts that they include in their definition are typically related to Bloom's taxonomy. It's important to note that critical thinking of any kind is never universal within a discipline or across a discipline in any individual. Its quality, or therefore, is typically a matter of degree and dependent, among other things, the quality and depth of experience in a given domain of thinking laying in the lap of the instructor. In a recent survey of 30 of my own online criminal justice adjunct instructors just last month, I asked them to define critical thinking. I've noted the key words in their definition. There's a consistency of Bloom's taxonomy concepts, just like Scriven and Paul. But there's not a consistency of responses. Of the 25 that responded, there were 25 different responses. And as noted, the concepts of analysis, articulation, application, and reflection comprise the modal responses. My concern, of course, is that these instructors were teaching in the same discipline for the same institution without a consistent definition. And these are instructors from the same department, some teaching the same courses. A number of researchers have suggested why critical thinking must be valued and emphasized and evaluated throughout courses. It's beneficial to consider how both faculty and students benefit from the application and reception of critical thinking instruction. In particular, those who benefit from the application of instruction related to critical thinking include students, instructors, the academic department, the institution, and the future employers in the profession hiring adequately educated and prepared students. Past research has been done in the traditional classroom environment to examine the relative value of various instructional strategies for the promotion of student critical thinking abilities. Past research has noted there's actually a dilemma in learning, in teaching, and applying critical thinking skills, especially once the student leaves the university and attempts to apply the required skills in the real world. And let's face it, critical thinking is hard. Our students don't always get it. Not surprising, in a 1990 survey, Deanna Kuhn conducted a rigid survey of 160 people and came to the conclusion that the majority of people can't, even when prompted, reliably exhibit basic skills of general reasoning and argumentation. Just like the pose in Rodin's sculpture to the right, critical thinking is a highly contrived activity. Even if humans were naturally inclined to think critically, it would still be difficult to master because of what cognitive scientists call a higher order skill. Critical thinking is a complex activity. It's built up out of other skills that are simpler and easier to acquire, but you have to have those lower skills, and you have to be able to combine the lower level skills in the right way. And it takes a long time to master. It's hard. It's like learning a foreign language. There's no silver bullets. It's a lifelong journey, and unfortunately most online courses are 8 weeks in length and lack the sufficient emphasis on critical thinking skills. So practice makes perfect. Critical thinking is a skill. Mastering a skill takes practice, and lots of it. And to get better, students and instructors have to engage in critical thinking itself. And many college professors seem unaware of this point. They simply teach a course on critical thinking theory, and they expect students will get better. Or they expect that others have taught that skill in another course. They expose their students to critical thinking and writing and expect them to be able to critically think. And that's about as effective as getting better at tennis by watching Wimbledon on TV, or getting better at golf by watching the Masters tournament. Students have a great deal to gain from critical thinking. One of the most important benefits of critical thinking and writing is that they learn how to approach a problem from several different perspectives. Carol McKnight emphasized that students have to be able to examine logical relationships among statements of information and data, and to construct arguments and respect divergent perspectives. Students are taught, or the conceptual ideas that they're taught, in the application of critical thinking skills in the classroom, and then they can go and apply these skills in their future outside the classroom. It's expected, indeed it's an objective, that students will gain important knowledge from the expansion of critical thinking espoused through numerous institutional missions, or the college mission and the specific discipline missions. Research has confirmed that participating in the critical thinking process can help students feel connected and engaged in the process of learning, as well as increase the exploration of new information and different perspectives. Participation in the critical thinking process allows them to challenge themselves and the views of others in supportive and helpful manners, rather than threatening or intimidating in communicating this process with the instructor. And moreover, this can be accomplished by participating in classroom discussions and maintaining focused discussions and stimulating discussions by asking probing questions and full participation both in the online asynchronous and the face-to-face classroom discussion. Dan Barrett reported in a January 2012 issue of the Chronicle for Higher Education that when specifically tested and compared, graduates who scored in the bottom 20% of a test on critical thinking fared far more poorly on measures of employment and lifestyle when compared with those who scored in the top 20%. Not surprising. Further, Barrett reported that college graduates who showed paltry gains in critical thinking and little academic engagement while in college have a harder time than their more accomplished peers as they start their careers. There are also benefits to the faculty. Faculty members also benefit from the process of teaching and sometimes student usage of the critical thinking, and can provide activities that require students to be more active participants in the learning process. But both students and faculty members have to be fully involved in this process, and it takes a lot of time, and it's hard. It's hard for the faculty, it's hard for the student to create this process of mutual learning and the development of critical thinking. The Association of American Colleges and Universities found that there is somewhat of a disparity in faculty in the prioritization of analytical and critical thinking skills. 93% here, and the percent of graduates, 65%, that are able to demonstrate these skills. More than a decade after the California study that I referred to earlier revealed this large disparity between faculty who favored critical thinking but were unable to define the concepts of critical thinking, many faculty instructors still fully appreciate the importance of teaching their students in support of developing critical skills, yet they are often still unwilling to take the time, or they're not given the time, to guide their students through the learning process, or they lack the skills to do so, or they expect that other courses will have that responsibility, or they're simply not equipped to transfer critical thinking skills to their students due to their own unfamiliarity with the pedagogical approaches. More recent researchers have found that the asynchronous nature of online learning may be more conducive to thoughtful reflection than timed learning. They have time to go back and look up what they're talking about and gather their thoughts and present it in a written format. Both modes of teaching, however, of critical thinking can be beneficial and integrate critical thinking into all course areas, in lectures and video instructions and assessments and website assessments and discussions, and whatever the mode. The institution benefits from students acquiring and utilizing critical thinking skills. Research has indicated that in every discipline there's a need for students to think critically and analytically. There's a general consensus between disciplines on the need for students to develop these critical thinking skills. However, there's a lack of consensus between the disciplines as to what constitutes critical thinking and how it can be applied to college classrooms and how it can be measured. It's like speaking with each other in different languages. Similar to the situation with on-campus classes, online instructors tend to focus on students' efforts, on content, on knowledge retrieval, lower level thinking. Another benefit for the department that comes from effective critical thinking instruction is that developing critical thinking skills and mastering knowledge in a student's chosen field of study should be a primary aim for any institution of higher learning. Course-related student-faculty interaction is related to higher college GPAs, to large gains in critical thinking and communications, to student degree aspirations, and greater satisfaction with overall college experience. The emphasis on critical thinking can also benefit departments in colleges and universities. It is both important and educationally worthwhile to emphasize instruction of critical thinking because the personal benefits to the students their current and future employers and society generally are quite hot. We know this through mission statements, through institutional goals and objectives, yet it's somehow lost in downward and upward transmission. It's like they're talking right past each other. And while it's not discipline specific, this enhanced emphasis on critical thinking skills can honestly improve departmental connections with their majors. These connections can foster educational and professional growth among majors. The unification of teaching can strengthen connections related to the discipline that can lead to a growth in the number and the quality of the majors, and this leads to improved quality of graduates. Unfortunately, as Gene Vandernack reported, there's a shortage of resources and training in terms of what's needed to promote critical thinking. In particular, departments, colleges, and universities promote critical thinking in institutional priorities and strategic plans and goals and mission statements. For instructors across the discipline, the goal is to their content expertise to design a number of effective techniques for designing and developing critical thinking activities and an environment that utilizes critical thinking strategies to enhance students' understanding of discipline-specific outcomes. The transmission of critical thinking skills in the college classroom has documented positive effects and incentives on various student outcomes, including student subject matter competence and cognitive skills and intellectual growth, their attitudes and values and educational attainment and career choices. Employer studies have documented the decrease of hiring individuals with only high school diplomas and increasing lifetime earnings. We know that, and we know that employers are now giving specific tests related to critical thinking skills before they even consider graduating students from the college field. In a 2011 survey commissioned by the Accrediting Council for Independent Colleges and Schools, it was found that only 7% of hiring decision makers believe that post-secondary education system does an excellent job preparing students for the workforce, while 54% say it does a good job, and 39% say it does only a fair or a poor job. 45% of decision makers believe that most students would be better served by an education that specifically prepares them for the workplace. They'd be wasting their time in college. An obvious concern is that our graduates are crucial to sustaining the economic competitiveness of our nation. The critical thinking levels of students increase with increased education. Employers in all professions are recruiting and hiring individuals with noted analytical skills who can clearly and critically think, which somewhat explains the high unemployment rate of recent college graduates with whom simply did not acquire the needed critical thinking skills. Most recently, researchers found that students majoring in business education, social work, and communication showed the smallest gains over 4 years in critical thinking and analytical reasoning, while liberal arts majors reveal significantly higher gains in critical thinking, in complex reasoning, and in writing skills. In a recent study by Richard Aram and Josefa Roxa, with more than 2,000 college students who were followed from 2005 to 2009 at 24 different U.S. colleges and universities, they found that many college graduates leave school without critical thinking skills, or the verbal and written communication skills that used to be the essence of college education. 45% of students didn't improve their reasoning or their writing skills at all in the first 2 years of college, and 36% hadn't improved higher order thinking skills, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation by the time they graduated. Those that did improve, on average, only went from the 50th to the 68th percentile. Not a surprising newsflash that there are reported findings that graduates seeking employments matching their skills and interests will be more likely to have improved job and career satisfaction. They'll have reduced job turnover and reinforcement of the importance of college academic achievement and performance. And this has been somewhat depicted and confirmed in the high number of unemployed recent college graduates. A future study needs to address the critical thinking skills and employer demands of those hired versus those who remain unemployed or underemployed. Unfortunately, Aram and Roxa present a somewhat controversial thesis of what college is not teaching students, critical reasoning and writing skills, and backed up with in-depth research. Many students, 45% by Aram and Roxa's numbers, show no learning, no career management, minimal time in difficult classes, and maximum socializing in order to achieve an increasingly expensive and meaningless certificate. And it's a two-way street between the institution and the student. Existing organizational cultures and practices too often don't prioritize undergraduate learning. Faculty and administrators are working to meet multiple and at times competing demands, and this too rarely focuses on either improving instruction or demonstrating gains in student learning. They simply often lack the time or the resources to devote to the student. At the heart of Aram and Roxa's finding is the lack of academic rigor. 32% of students that they studied did not take any courses in their 4-year college degree with 40 pages or more of reading a week. And 50% didn't take a single course in which they wrote more than 20 pages during the entire semester. Students in the sample reported spending on average only 12 to 14 hours a week studying, 50% less than a few decades ago. And much of that study took place in a fashionable but inefficient group for the data analysis. And this lack of time was validated in both 2007 and a 2011 time usage study of college and university students compiled by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The current research is an exploratory study that examined the views of college faculty teaching, their delivery mode of either online versus face-to-face, and whether they were full-time versus adjunct, or whether they had completed specific training for teaching critical thinking. To address this need for additional research, this study addressed the following questions. How does the mode of teaching affect emphasis on teaching critical thinking, that is face-to-face or online? How does status, full-time versus adjunct, affect emphasis on teaching critical thinking? And how does the completion of training related to critical thinking affect teaching critical thinking? Well, it's apparent that critical thinking skills have multiple benefits to different groups. The literature focuses on the effects and the benefits of teaching students these critical thinking skills. The recent studies that I addressed have examined the impact of critical thinking on future education and employment and various issues related to the individual. Further, the research is focused on how the educational institution is related to incorporating instruction focused on improving critical thinking and how to assess the benefits of critical thinking. The current research utilized a critical thinking survey based on a web-based survey utilizing SurveyShare that was distributed to 430 college and university teachers from the instructor through professor rank in the state of Georgia, and online instructors from educational institutions with home campuses in Alabama and Missouri. The survey was distributed via email to every faculty member listed on the current website for every college and university in the state of Georgia, political science and criminal justice departments, and every current online instructor, adjunct, and full-time political science and criminal justice for Park University and Troy University. As a result of the sampling, all respondents were then teaching in the discipline of CJ or political science or closely related. The respondents were teaching in the face-to-face classroom setting, online, or both. The majority of respondents reported that they taught exclusively in the traditional face-to-face classroom, and I say majority, meaning about 56%. The survey was designed by the researcher. Overall, 154 surveys were completed for a response rate of 36%, which it was sent out in the summertime when many of them were away and not so inclined to respond. The distribution of respondents is reflected in Table 1. The college and university faculty members surveyed are from three major sectors of private four-year colleges and universities, public four-year college and universities, and two-year public and private colleges. As I mentioned, the survey employed three strategies comparing online and face-to-face, full-time and part-time, and those who stated that they had received some specific training, whether in faculty development, professional development, conferences on critical thinking, and those who didn't. Two-thirds of the respondents report that they are full-time faculty members, and one-half teach online. Two-thirds have terminal degrees, and nearly two-thirds have been teaching for 10 years or more. As I mentioned, the three strategies of comparing face-to-face, full-time, part-time, and with or without, attempted to explore the importance that institutions and departments and faculty place on critical thinking. And this included addressing faculty perception of classroom instruction, assignments, and discussions focusing on learning outcomes as tied to the mode of delivery, the status of the faculty member and specific training, professional development related to critical thinking, and how does full-time versus adjunct influence importance placed on critical thinking, or mode, or influence of importance placed on teaching critical thinking skills. How does this mode or status affect how participation in the training may have affected how the emphasis they place in the classroom. The major categories of the survey instrument addressed the importance of incorporating various pedagogies in their classroom, the level of importance placed on developing critical thinking skills in their students, the level of importance on the use of class discussions and written assignments, the importance of varied assignments and levels of instructor participation, and the importance of instructor active learning strategies. The survey, as I said, employed the three strategies. Two-thirds of the respondents reported that they were full-time faculty, one-half taught online, two-thirds terminal degrees. We were interested in determining the degree to which faculty's perception and usage of critical thinking were utilized in the building of community in the classroom, the development of critical thinking skills in both face-to-face and online classroom by adjuncts, full-time faculty, and finally between faculty that had received specific training. Specifically, respondents were asked to respond to questions such as, do you assign weekly readings that require written products based on the reading? The specific items included recognition and validation of student submissions in a timely manner, active participation in classroom discussion, full explanation of how students read and discuss course requirements, providing students with an assortment of websites and outside materials to allow sufficient information to discuss, to debate, and establish positions on course reading and preparation of students to read, to participate and critically write and think within the classroom setting, whether it be online or face-to-face. The survey questions were somewhat extensive. The respondents were asked to place the level of importance that they placed on these various levels of teaching and conducting their classrooms, and the importance of many aspects were clearly and statistically noted between instructors that had received specific training in the area of critical thinking. That's the major crux, is that the statistical differences were between those who had received training, not between mode of teaching, not between full-time and part-time, but if they had received, which drives the need for providing professional development related to critical thinking. A higher level of importance on reflecting on the usage of critical thinking was shown by these individuals. The explanation emphasis through discussions, assignments, grading. A statistically higher importance was found on improving students' metacognitive abilities. They reported, those that had received critical thinking training reported significantly higher importance on allowing students to reflect on informed writing. And this is key in both modes of teaching, but has been shown to be most effective in the asynchronous nature of online learning we call Carol McKnight's study. And those with critical thinking training reported a significantly higher utilization of effective questioning strategies that ask for clarification, evidence, and reasoning versus simply recall or one correct answer types of tests and quizzes. They placed a higher importance on teaching explicitly how to do the thinking needed for tasks. The assumptions, as we have found, may not be assumed to have been taught or addressed in other courses, and this may be that course for that instructor, that they're not depending that someone else taught it in their classes. They're going to be that instructor. And fortunately, there were a number of those responding to utilizing critical thinking as part of their course and emphasizing these concepts. Those with critical thinking training placed a statistically significant higher importance on using critical thinking to distinguish facts from opinions. And likewise, they placed a higher importance on including critical thinking in their classroom, with an emphasis on the recognition of biases and prejudices, which are crucial in classroom discussions and beyond. And they placed a statistically higher importance on using and applying critical thinking for pointing out common errors in published and non-published information. Very importantly, and from my own standpoint as a course evaluator and program coordinator, those with specific critical thinking training placed a higher importance on actively participating in classroom discussions versus simply observing student participation. I would like to emphasize again the significant points of differences in the importance placed on many aspects of teaching and incorporating critical thinking in the classroom by those surveyed, and I'd emphasize that there were many points of importance placed on many aspects related to critical thinking, whether they had received training or they hadn't. The majority of all the respondents agreed that they encouraged the development of critical thinking in the classroom discussion, but I'm a little skeptical based on the California study that everybody wants to think they do, but are they really walking the walk and talking the talk? Approximately 2/3 of all respondents placed a higher importance on ensuring that students are more involved in more than passive listening, and ensuring that students are engaged in activities of reading and writing, discussing, and ensuring that students are involved in higher order thinking and analysis. The overall purpose of my research was to assess the importance of teaching critical thinking skills to college students, specifically criminal justice and political science students. Although an argument can be extended to almost any discipline and to assess for differences in who or why critical thinking was being taught in online courses. When you think about the future roles of our students, for example, in criminal justice and law enforcement or political science, you realize that their day is potentially filled with pressure, reactionary, spur-of-the-moment decisions and implications. For example, if they're engaged in an arrest situation or a budgetary decision or a social issue there's a level of thought and understanding that goes into their decision on what alternatives to review and what choices to make and what implications of what their decision will be. And in that regard, it is a highly valuable tool for criminal justice or political science graduates to be well-versed in the process and the implementation of critical thinking skills. Critics argue that the challenge in all universities, both traditional and online, is to understand the extent to which critical thinking is used and evaluated, and whether or not college graduates are able to apply critical thinking skills to everyday situations. The current argument is that colleges and universities are currently failing and falling well short of that goal. And by implementing more specific requirements and assessment plans oriented on critical thinking assessment, from my own institutional standpoint, we can really prepare our students for higher order thinking required by employers. It is my intent to use my findings as a starting point for establishing a handbook for adjuncts for inclusion in enhancing and assessing critical thinking skills in the 25 criminal justice courses that I oversee, to include professional development training. Success here may lead to spreading the process at the college and university level. We can only rely less heavily on multiple choice questions and tests and more directly on short answer and essay questions to understand a student's ability to reason and analyze complex situations. Also, a plan is that we can couple that with an initial student and faculty assessment of critical thinking in an effort to more specifically guide classroom activities and feedback. I plan to begin now for implementation in AY 2013-14, and possibly this time next year I can report back with a success story. I realize this has been somewhat of a rehash of information for many viewers, and I do hope that it has added to your critical thinking toolbox. I would appreciate your questions and welcome your suggestions, especially if you have incorporated critical thinking specifically into your classroom, either online or face-to-face. I would like to thank the conference coordinator for the opportunity to present, and again to ET for her assistance in providing me with the information needed to participate, and I invite your questions and comments concerning the presentation to the email listed below. Thank you.